Hello and happy Thursday, everybody. Josh here with On the Wrong Lead, back live streaming in the comfort of my own home. Obviously, a couple weeks ago with Derby, I was out of pocket. I was in Kentucky and had to make things work in interesting ways, recording hotel rooms and on the kitchen table of my friend's place, but. Back in the usual digs here, and second leg of the Triple Crown, Preakness Stakes coming up here. Obviously, there's already big news of the scratch of Muth, and I obviously changes the complexion of the race. But we got an entire late pick five, and when I think of pick fives, I usually think of Mark because he loves to play himself some just thick ass pick fives, but. I'm going to bring in my friend and podcast co-host, Andrew Champagne. Andrew, I'm going to let you defend yourself here because I've been just trashing your character in private chat to anybody who would listen.
You
about
always
you
do
saying
that. You
about
always
you
do
saying
that, and you didn't need an excuse to trash my character in private chats. Someone trashed my character in a public YouTube comment, which I think may have been meant by that person deleting their Twitter account. But we'll figure things out. But no, go ahead.
I cashed the over. I had the over under on you mentioning that story on air at 0.5.
Okay, what were the odds on that?
Probably like minus 1,000.
Okay,
I'll take the win.
I just influenced the pool, and I've been in touch with the bookmakers, and I'll be getting my cut regardless.
Yeah, you think that there's too many pick fives on these 2 days?
10's too many. It's too many. 10 is too many.
There is no such thing as too many pick fours or pick fives. Pick fours and pick fives should be rolling. You should be able to find your spots, and build structures around them. There is no such thing as too many. You are just
Mark. I have a responsible gambling pamphlet right here next to the Lord Miles picture that I'll be trotting out at some point, and I'll be sending that over to you momentarily. I suggest you read it. Also, hi Josh, hi Mark, hi On the Wrong Lead. How are we doing on this fine Thursday? I'm off of bowling for a couple of weeks, so very happy to drop in and talk some all stakes pick five action ending in the Preakness, which is a pick five that I will be playing, unlike several of the other 10. Money management, folks.
And I think I should bring in a man who is probably contractually obligated to say play every single pick five and pick four, and please send all your money through Naira Bets, Mr. Matthew DeSantis. How are you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. And I absolutely agree with Mark that there should be. I am usually perturbed when there is not a pick five in race two. That I'm just like, listen, I got knocked out in the first leg. I want to come right on back. And I want to roll with another pick five sequence. Let's get this thing going. So, I agree with Andrew's general point, though, about, bankroll management. You got to be smart about this. Just because there might be a lot of pick fives doesn't mean you have to play all of them. But I think this is a really interesting pick five, and it's one that I would anticipate is going to pay out handsomely because there are not a lot of huge, obvious, short-priced favorites in this sequence that people will feel confident singling. And I think as a result, you can really do a lot of zigging where others might zag, and you could find yourself a really, really nice payout on this late pick five.
Guys, I have very bad news. This is like probably the worst thing that could possibly happen to this live stream just happened.
Thank you. Thank you, good sir. Thank you, good sir. By the way, before we go much further,
how much did you pay him?
Nothing. At any rate, I have a question. Were we all supposed to dress up? Because looking at Matthew, I just feel ridiculously underdressed right now in my WWE Slam t-shirt that you can get on Homage.
So he's got shorts on.
Matthew came out of the womb wearing a tie and a vest.
100%.
How he rolls.
100% I'm wearing gym shorts. 2, and slippers that I just kicked off. Actually, I was looking like the dude a little bit, but I will say that I remember coming on to the show probably 3-4 guest appearances ago, and I remember Josh's face being like sorely disappointed that I was not more dressed up, and I could tell that he was like visibly like, huh. You're just wearing like a polo shirt. Okay. And so ever since then, I was like, you know something? We're dressing up. We got a shtick. We got to stick to it. We're gonna, I don't care if it's 8:30 at night. I'm going for it.
But
there is nothing wrong with
we're not wearing the
to a
hat.
gimmick.
Yeah, there was a post, and this was years ago, I think, at this point, Matthew. I think you were at Gulfstream Park for just like a random day, and you were just wearing like a t-shirt. And it was just wild. I could not believe what I'd seen. It's like I mean, the best thing I could think of is like, I don't know if any of you guys grew up Catholic whatsoever, but like, you guys ever remember like seeing like a priest like just like at a bar or something, right? Not wearing his garb and everything, and you're like, whoa, this does not feel right. Like, you are not like wearing the robe and everything. Like, what is going on here?
I remember I think you texted, I think you replied to that picture, and you were like, blink 3 times if you're in duress. Like, if you've been kidnapped, let us know you're okay. And yeah, it was Gulfstream Park. It was actually the day before the Florida Derby 2 years ago. And yeah, I remember that. And so, yeah, I will sometimes be casual and hang out.
All right, we got a flip flopper. He also agrees with you.
Well, I try to straddle the line. So, NHL fanatic, good dude. Yeah, he hits me up on Twitter actually a fair amount, and so he plays my long shot of the day all the time. So I have to give him a shout out.
Well, I mean,
just Gary's alt. That's just Gary's alt, isn't it?
Maybe could be.
It would fit, right?
All right, and I saved this for Mark. So I don't know. This had to have been one of our first live streams. I bought a bottle of Macallan 12. I believe it was Macallan 12, and I couldn't open the bottle. I was like sitting there, and I was just fidgeting with it. So now, anytime I'm gonna open up a bottle before a live stream, I save it for the live stream. And this is actually a birthday gift for my brother. It's a nice. I don't know if you can get it in there. It's a nice E.H. Taylor small batch here.
Ooh, that's very nice stuff. That's
so
one of my top 3 or 4s actually.
I love it. I mean, this is one of my favorite, just like regular ass bourbons, which used to be able to find it everywhere, but obviously that well has dried up. I remember, Mark, there was a time where you were running like a hustle for me and Caleb, where you were just like buying up all the local bottles and just shipping them to us.
Yep, that this was we probably shouldn't admit to that, but that could very well have happened. Yes.
But luckily, this is easy to open bottle. So cheers, guys. I know, Matthew, you got a bit of tequila over there. What kind of tequila are you drinking?
This is Sauza, which I actually got down in Mexico when I toured their distillery down there in Tequila, Mexico, which was quite lovely. And it also speaks to like the difference between Mexico and the United States, or like every other country, in that if there was a place like Tequila, Mexico in the United States, which, like, I mean, maybe you could make a comparison to like Asheville, where there's a lot of breweries or places like that. It would be super commercialized, and like there'd be all sorts of like Disney-esque rides. And you go down to Tequila, Mexico, and nobody speaks English. Nobody. And like, it's just like, thank God I had 4 years of Spanish in high school, because we were struggling to get by with like, where's the biblioteca? And it's just like, and donde los zapatos? Like, it was just one of those. But it was awesome. It's really amazing down there. If anybody has a chance to go, it's about an hour outside of Guadalajara, and it's incredible. And there's like 50 tequila distilleries there. It's like the Napa Valley of distilleries. It's so cool.
Yeah. So funny story about Sauza, right? It gets a pretty bad rap as like a really, really just like cheap ass tequila. However, they have a bottle that's got like a blue rooster on it. It's super cheap. It's like $12 or something, but it's 100% blue agave, and it says it on the on the actual label. So that's how you know the difference between that and the other Sauza. It makes a perfectly competent margarita or mixer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's way better than just your plain ass Jose Cuervo or whatever. So yeah, I see Matthew Bickey there. He sends Salsa Silver. I think that's what I forget the name of it. Like I just know what the
Yeah.
bottle looks like. But yeah, I mean, Matthew.
It's also like the crazy part is when you go down there, like I toured the Cuervo distillery as well, and you tour the Cuervo distillery and you're like, this is Budweiser, like whatever.
Mhm.
And then they're like, this is the stuff we sell to the United States. And then this is the stuff that we actually just keep in Mexico. And
Yeah.
like you drink their like good stuff and you're like, oh, Cuervo is like amazing when they actually care about what they're doing. Like they just send the crap to us in the US. But like their other stuff is, I think it's true of most places. Like their top shelf stuff is excellent. And it's just, what you get in the general public is just going to be their run of the mill, lower level stuff.
It's like Steve Asmussen, right? Steve Asmussen that's running at Lone Star, like, no, like, come on, give me a break here, right? But Steve Asmussen that's running in, running at Churchill Downs and stakes races, like, yeah, like this is the real stuff. This is the real Steve Asmussen, right?
That's the real.
It's just like,
I don't even know if he braids the mane of the ones that he's running down in Sam Houston, but when he braids the manes in at Churchill, we're going for a higher speed figure best.
God bless him though. Like every once in a while, like it's just a random like Wednesday night, and you're watching Remington Park, and you see Steve saddling up like a 10,000 claimer or a 5,000 claimer, and you're like, man, this guy is just everywhere. Like God bless him. Gary talking about the good stuff, the good Jose Cuervo Reserva de la Familia. Yeah, you can get it here. It's pretty expensive. I think the Reposado is like $120-$130 or so a bottle, but it's good stuff. Andrew, what are you drinking? Coke?
This is actually a very special limited edition caffeine-free Diet Coke.
Ooh,
wow. Not Coke Zero, huh?
See that
No, I gotta start moderating the caffeine intake, starting to not sleep all that well, which is what happens when you handicap 9,000 races on big days for a couple weeks in a row. And by the way, it's also what happens when on a Saturday first post time is at 7:30 a.m. Pacific.
Oh, we heard this
time.
one already too.
No, you heard this one already. Matthew and Mark did not. So
I listened to the podcast. I did hear it as well.
Hey, you listened to the podcast. I'm so proud of you. At any rate, for those out there that did not, part of the podcast, which you should absolutely listen to after this live stream ends, available on the On the Wrong Lead Network, wherever you get your podcast, and on our YouTube channel, is I'm tired of people complaining about the length of time between races on big days. The bigger complaint is 7:30 a.m. Pacific time starts on Derby and Preakness Day. Come on, people. What are we doing here?
Goodness. Mark, what are you drinking? You have alcohol in front of you?
No, I do not. I didn't bring anything fun home. A couple of you guys hadn't been drinking lately. I didn't realize everybody'd show up with stuff, and so I just got water. I'm horribly boring.
It's all good.
Sorry.
It's all good. But what's not boring is this pick 5 that we're going to be starting here. And it's going to start in race 9 here. We're going to start with the James W. Murphy 100K listed stakes race here, going a mile on the turf. And I'll tell you guys, I saw Andy Sterling was playing Weatherman a little bit, and I think we had a little chuckle about that on the pod, Andrew. But has anyone seen an updated weather forecast? What are we looking like on Saturday?
I have biblical.
I saw the exact opposite. I saw considerably less rain.
Oh, I heard rain. I heard 70% chance of rain all day.
It's 70% chance of rain all day, but they're only calling for 0.3 of an inch of rain, which is not enough to take stakes races off the turf.
Oh,
they may take some of the early. They may take some of the early off, but I don't expect it to be a bog. I expect it to take some water and be, it's going to be wet, but it's not going to be a washout.
Yeah, I've largely heard what Mark has. It'll be wet, but it won't be implayable. I wouldn't be shocked if some of the early races are taken off just to ensure that the turf course is in good shape later. But I don't think this is going to be a replay of like Pennsylvania Derby Day when they ran the turf monster in what was a bog that day, and they should not have run that race on.
Yeah, judging by the way those races were run, I don't think they should have been running on that particular day. That was just made my skin crawl a little bit just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm assuming this race is on the turf. as I've said numerous times, you have to be nimble. You have to be flexible with your handicapping. Obviously, if this all comes off, or like Andrew said, if it's a noticeable bog, maybe you gotta move some things around, change things around. Mark will probably be outside doing a rain dance, hoping that it turns sloppy, because he loves those $60 pick sixes, like we had Justify his year at Pimlico for Preakness. But you got some MTOs in here. You got a ton of horses that have not run on dirt. I think a total of 4 or 5 horses that don't have or haven't run on the turf. So yeah, I mean, you look at like a horse like the 5 Speediness, and I know on time form he looks like just a super fast horse, but he hasn't run on the turf, and he doesn't necessarily have much turf pedigree. I thought that this is a pretty tough race to kind of figure out where to go with a little bit of the uncertainty. But Mark, when I think of tough races, I think of you. So where did you land? And this is definitely not me chicking out of this.
I was gonna say I was really hoping you wouldn't land first here. No, it's a really tough race, and I think when I looked at this pick 5 sequence, this is the race that I want the most coverage in. This is a race that I want to spread. I want to try to find prices. That the aforementioned Speediness, who probably runs like his namesake. He is somewhat interesting in here. Just for he's going to be on the front end. We're assuming that they're going to catch some water. It's going to be at least a softer going turf track. And whether or not you believe it, turf tracks do have kickback, and I'll take horses that can be out in front. I tend to like speed horses on softer going days. So I didn't. Albeit Speediness does not have that turf start. I thought Speediness was a really interesting player here. The one horse on the rail, Lucky Jeremy, there's a horse I see you have an A over, and I would imagine for the same reason that I do. This is a horse that they tried to stretch out, ran in the Stakes and the Lexington, but his best running has come at a little bit shorter, and I really like the cutback in distance here. And if you're a time form person, his best figure by far is in that in the Stakes Turfway, and we know that Synth tends to play a little bit more more like turf than dirt necessarily does. So I think this is one pedigree says he should handle it, and there's certain times of the year where Mike Maker can do no wrong, and I wonder if we're getting into that Mike Maker time of year where he can he can move this one up just a little bit to make him a major player. The other horse I thought was really interesting was the Safi horse, who I think they have the I can't remember who what the 4-horse Twirling Point is your money line favorite, but it wouldn't surprise me if a Brumar, the 10 for Safi, ends up going off your favorite horse. Is 2 for 2 going the distance. But again, it's one of those ones there's a couple questions to ask because those mile trips were at Gulfstream. Safi sometimes doesn't ship so well, and is this just a horse that likes that firmer turf going, which another horse we'll talk about later on in the sequence who is definitely one of those. So, I played around in here. I have some other prices that I did like, but I'll throw it out to some other guys and see where else everybody else landed.
Yeah, this is bad that you and I have see this race pretty similarly.
That's really bad. Yeah,
I really like the one. I think you kind of mentioned it. It does have that run on synthetic. Didn't run awful, but it does seem like got to the lead, and once he got to the straight, he just weakened. Maybe the cutting back a furlong is going to help with that. I do think that Mike Maker is good in getting these horses to go 2 turns on the turf. Yes, Andrew, I realized I said long earlier, and you were like, hey, a mile's not really that long. It's long for me, okay? It takes me a long time to run a mile. But inside drawn speed, you get Juan Hernandez aboard. Those West Coast jocks are definitely not afraid to use their speed, unlike maybe 90% of the East Coast jocks, not named Luis Saez. Same thing with the 10. I agree with you, Mark. I think this is probably going to be a horse that takes a ton of money. I think people are going to see Irad aboard. This is a horse that has done, a really good running both on the lead and just slightly off. I had a hard time, looking past this one. And then Just outside, I think the 12 Fulmineo here for Arnaud Delacour and Flavian Prat. This is one that hasn't necessarily had the best, I guess, luck to win a race here. Is obviously won, broke his maiden at Colonial, and then went straight into graded stakes company, back to back, a grade 2 and a grade 1. Came back in an optional claimer on the dirt for some reason. Maybe they were thinking, hey, we're going to run this horse back, getting the Derby fever a little bit. But came to their senses, ran a mile, ran pretty decently at Tampa, stretched out a little bit longer, and they're basically cutting back here again. So I think the cutback is going to be good. And this is just a horse I know that seems to really like the turf. I mean, you put a line through that BC Juvenile turf, and this horse is in 4 tries, going 2 turns, has got a win in 3 seconds. So, I think this horse is coming in decent enough form, and maybe kind of looking at this race, if some of this dirt speed stays in here, I could see there being a fair bit of speed, and maybe it does set up pretty nicely for this 12 Fulmineo on the outside. Matthew, how did you kind of see this race?
Yeah, it's a good transition because Fulmineo is my top pick actually in this race. So I really like the 12. I think getting the blinkers put on will definitely help perhaps provide this horse a little bit more acceleration out of the gate, a little bit early, more speed. That said, I don't think he's anywhere near the sort of speed that some of the horses you mentioned earlier, like a Lucky Jeremy or a Speediness, will display. So I would expect him to be sitting that second flight trip. Obviously, Flavian Prat needs to work out how he's going to approach this race from the far outside post. He's going to need to get over. I do think the blinkers are an asset in that regard. And that he should be able to get over and hopefully stay around the 2 path, maybe the 3 path at worst, but be able to get over. And like you said, he's a turf horse, and that counts for something in some of these races. He's one that has shown a lot of really good form, and the losses that he's had, to a horse like Full Nelson, who was on a pretty big win streak for a little bit, those are fine. Finishing second to Agate Road back in the Grade 2 Pilgrim. So, he's lost a good competition when he has come up short. And like you mentioned, he's had that kind of brief foray onto the dirt, and the connections are now switching back. So I think he's really interesting. Like him and he might actually float up a little bit, I think, because I agree with Mark that Abrumar, the number 10, is going to take a little bit of action. This is a horse I liked as well for Safi. You do always wonder about how well Safi ships out of state, but usually he's all right in Maryland and the Mid-Atlantic. But that said, with Irad aboard, the horse is going to be taking some serious money. And I agree with Mark's larger point that he mentioned at the beginning, which is on these types of days where it is softer going, I usually prefer speed in my turf horses. That the wetter it gets on the softer the ground gets, the more difficult it tends to be to make up ground from the back. And so you really want to find horses. They don't all need to be on the lead, but you don't want to see horses that are going to be needing to come from 8-9 lengths back at the top of the stretch. That deep closing kick is not really what is very advantageous on these big days. So, those were a couple that I thought was interesting. Twirling Point, obviously the favorite, is a very tepid favorite at 4-1 on the morning line, and certainly has some nice races. I do wonder. This will be not a class test, but, the horse, finished third in a listed stake at Santa Anita. And I always worry about those kind of West Coast turf horses coming east, and particularly, the best running was done out in Santa Anita on the perfectly manicured grass of Southern California. I will say the number 6 and the number 7 horses are both a little interesting to me. The number 6, Naptown for Graham Motion, is trying the turf for the first time and stretching out a little bit, but Graham's just one of those, horsemen that I tend to trust when he puts a horse on the grass, that there's something intentional about that. So that's kind of one horse that I have my eye on. I wouldn't necessarily include him on my tickets, but I'm interested to see how he runs in this spot. And then the 7, I think, is pretty interesting for Trombetta, coming out of a Florida bred victory. And again, has some tactical speed. I wonder how that's going to hold up in this spot, because he's really been kind of facing lesser company. So he might be a little bit further back against this field. That's my only concern at 6-1. But, if there is a lot of speed, and Mike could get the right setup.
Andrew. And Andrew, I'm sorry that you didn't get top billing like Matthew did. I know.
It's okay. It's okay. Look, it's fine. I have no issue with that. We have our own show. It's cool. It's no big deal. The bigger thing that I have a problem with, though, is I'm going to go completely contrarian here with you guys. You're talking about a lot of speed horses. I like none of them. I don't like Lucky Jeremy. I don't like horse number 5, Speediness. I think there's plenty of speed in this race, and I think that's going to set things up for horses that aren't necessarily deep closers, but horses that want a little bit of a setup in front of them. We talked about Lucky Jeremy. We talked about Speediness. We talked a little bit about a Brumar, who I do think needs to go early. We also haven't talked about Takayo, who has one way of going. Last time out, they tried to rate the horse in the Colonel Liam. It did not go well. I think there's going to be speed signed on in this particular spot. And up until Matt talked, the only horse that Mark or Josh talked about that I was remotely interested in was the 12th Fulmineo, but that's a horse that seems to find trouble. This is a horse whose best effort is certainly good enough to win. But if you look at the running lines, you see things like 4 wide, 4-path traffic. How do you find traffic in the 4-path? I'm just saying. 5 wide into the stretch, traffic. Bump between horses, wide on the turn. On one hand, the outside post is not a bad thing for horses that tend to find some trouble because you've got Flavien Prat, and he ought to be able to give this horse every chance at a clean trip. But some horses make their own trouble. So for me, I'm using Fulmineo, but he would be a B in this particular spot. Matthew, you hit 2 of the horses that I like a fair bit in here, and that's number 6, Naptown, and number 7, Crystal Quest. Naptown has the toss 2 angle at play, where 2 starts back on November 25th, my birthday, happy birthday me, ran 4th. Safe to assume something went wrong, though, because we didn't see this horse again until April. He came back, and he ran like a horse that needed a race. He stretches back out to 2 turns. Graham Motion does this with horses. He's not afraid to give a horse a prep in a fairly big spot. That's what he did in the Woodstock up at Woodbine. Was a 1-paced third going 6 furlongs. I think Naptown wants to go a little bit further than that. I think a mile hits him right between the eyes. Crystal Quest, meanwhile, hasn't done anything wrong as a 3-year-old. 3 for 3, has shown a little bit of tactical speed in a couple of the starts. Last time out, the first quarter was a little bit quick. He dropped back at Tampa, made 1 run. This is a little bit of a class test for him, but what I like about Crystal Quest is you know he doesn't necessarily need Lasix in order to run well. I did not mention the jockey. Don't you dare try me with that. If you're going to take a shot, don't miss. If that's one thing we've learned the last couple of days when it comes to me, if you're going to take a shot, don't miss. That was a miss, Josh, and you will be penalized accordingly. Having said that, I think Crystal Quest is a horse that's in form, has won without Lasix, unlike several others in this particular spot. For instance, Twirling Point, 2 for 2 with Lasix, 0 for 4 without it. As the great handicapper Harvey Pack always said, never bet a horse as the favorite doing something it's never done before. Using a couple of others in here, just want to talk about them really quick. Number 9, Echo Lane, comes in from Gulfstream. That makes me a little bit nervous, but the last 2 have been pretty good. He's pretty versatile. Joel Rosario sees fit to ride. I think we may see this one up a little bit closer. The bomb that I am throwing in is horse number 3, Massive. We're going to talk a lot about Maryland horses, and I think if the race falls apart, you need to use any closer you can find. And if there's one thing about Massive is he's a closer, and he's going to be moving the right way late. And if he's the one that picks up the pieces at some ridiculous price, and I don't have him on my ticket, I will be ill. That is what my friend Tom Amello would call a 2x4 horse. I'm using him as a B, and he'll at least be on some of my tickets. But my top 2 are Naptown and Crystal Quest. 3, 9, and 12 are the Bs in that spot. I understand where you guys are coming from as far as early speed being valuable, but I think there's a fair amount of speed in here. And if the speed winds up falling apart, I want to move on.
Yeah, I know a good friend of the show, Matthew Bickey, also is very high on Massive. It's one of his plays around here. So
smart guy.
He is an extremely smart guy and way better contest player than I will ever dream of being. But no, I thought Massive was interesting. I just didn't know what to do with the horse. And I had the same opinion on Massive that I did on the 12 horse in here that I know a couple of you guys liked about Fulmineo, which is don't both of those horses just have a massive case of the hangs? I mean, they run a lot of races, they finish on the board a lot, but they just never win. And then that was sort of my big issue with those horses. But I wouldn't talk again. Not talking anybody off of 20-1.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with Fulmineo that, and this is a case. Well, we could talk about this a little bit maybe later as well. And there's a few horses like this that. I do always like to differentiate between a horse that hangs, i.e. imagination, perhaps, and a horse that is just second best, like Just Steel. And so I think sometimes, that might be splitting hairs a little bit, but I do think there's a difference between when you watch a race and you go, that horse just does not want to go by this other horse versus, I think Andrew made a good case. The Fulmineo runs into a lot of trouble. Now that's its own problem that needs to be corrected for this spot. But when you're losing by a length and a half, 2 lengths, I don't see it as necessarily this horse is hanging as much as this horse is just second best. When I see a horse that hangs, it's a horse that's consistently losing by a half a length, a nose, a head, a neck. That's to me when I see that sort of thing, kind of how I interpret it. But again, that might be splitting hairs. That might be kind of putting too fine of a point on it.
I respect the take.
I see the Maryland biggest Maryland bred fan of all time.
Hey,
John Piasek in here. He's all in on speediness. He ran big in his last 2 starts. He thinks he'll like the grass. His dam was a stakes winner on the lawn. And then, of course, Tokayo, another Maryland bred. Tokayo was the name of a beer brewed for Rick Bayless's restaurants in Chicago. So, fun fact. Charles saying he agrees with Andrew. Oh, look at great guests tonight. Love the dynamics here in the discussion. Added value,
Andrew. I mean, there's no way these people just appear and agree with you. This is not a thing that happens.
I am surprised that you do not know this about me. People either love me or they really, really don't love me, and there is no middle ground at all whatsoever.
I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a middle ground, and I'm right in the middle of it.
Oh, I don't think so at all whatsoever, Josh. You know my heart is pure.
And Jessica saying, important distinction, Matt, in her opinion. So good call out there. Anything else you guys want to talk about in here?
I don't think we missed any horses, did we?
Just really quick, in the event this race goes off the turf, Copper Tax is a universal single, right?
No.
Correct.
Completely disagree.
Really?
You think speediness?
I think speediness is where I want to go if it comes off. Yeah, I want the front end horse.
Not entirely. So maybe this is also the gamesmanship sometimes of trying to handicap a card too far ahead of time is I'm not 100% sure speediness runs in this race. And so, Jamie Ness scratching out of this on a horse that's never tried the turf before, it wouldn't shock me. Let's just put it like that. If that horse doesn't end up running. So, there are certain horses like that, and there's a horse, running on tomorrow, Super Chow, who I'm not entirely sure what to do with that horse because as of last I checked, the horse still doesn't have a rider. So I don't know what Jorge Delicato's doing with that horse. And there's a Riley Mott horse that just worked out yesterday at Churchill Downs. Is that horse shipping up? I don't know. And so there are definitely some instances where you try to read the tea leaves a little bit to figure out who's coming and who's not.
Yeah, and also if this does come off, I think both Lucky Jeremy and Naptown are both interesting players in here. Lucky Jeremy broke his maiden off a sloppy Churchill surface, and Naptown has Tomlinson's to say that he should really enjoy the off going, and Graham is gonna, if he's in the race, he's probably live knowing Graham.
Yeah.
Yep. Matthew saying, excellent point. His handicapping can't be trusted without scratches, but it's a fun exercise. Yeah, and like I said, I was even saying earlier, right? You gotta be flexible, right? Your opinions will change, pace complexions change, weather changes. And yeah, you have to kind of be ready for all that. I think it's good to go in with a plan, but much like is it Mike Tyson that said everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face?
To the face.
So
Great line.
I love it. I quote that regularly. I love that line.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, let's move on to race 10 here. The Sir Barton. We're gonna be going a mile and 16th on the main track, and obviously your morning line favorite is Corporate Power, but Tuscan Sky is written in here, and yeah, I don't think he's running in this race. Yeah, your 9 to 5 favorite here is going to be the 5 Corporate Power, and then you got Imperial Gun, and then Ghoul's Gold, and then it just seems like it kind of really real tails off here. So Andrew, I'll let you go first here. Where did you land?
So really quick, Tuscan Sky's not running in this race.
Wait, do I have my Tuscan horses mixed up? Is that not the same horse?
One of them.
Oh God, that's Tuscan Gold.
Wrong trainer.
All right,
go outside, take a lap, Josh. Take a lap.
I'll take a lap. Well, you know what? That's really funny because I assumed I saw that and I'm like, this horse is cross-entered. This horse is not running here. That's what happens when I handicap these things so quickly.
Andrew, I'm so glad you said something because I was like furiously searching Twitter to be like, is Tuscan Sky headed to somewhere else? Like, what's going on?
I have a tab open with Tuscan Sky searched for.
That's so funny.
The same thing. I threw it in. I'm like, wait, did he was he scratched or did he get hurt or what's going on? And
so
I'll be honest. I'm really happy this happened going live and not when like you and I are recording a podcast, Andrew. Because I rarely edit, our video stuff. Sometimes I've had to edit some things, but it just takes so much time and effort to do, and I would really have hated to have to edit that out. But instead, it turns into something funny here.
Well, we'll do it live, and I got to tell you, the reason why I took such exception to you saying, "Oh, he's probably not going to run," he's a single for me in here. Horse number 8 in race number 10. I'm throwing out the Wood Memorial for pretty much every horse that ran in that race. That was a really strange race, complete with one of the worst falls I have ever seen during a race, and I have absolutely no idea how a horse that is running in the Sir Barton number 1 deposition was not seriously injured with that fall. It was horrible. I think that race, though, is a toss for a lot of horses that are entered on Saturday at Pimlico, including one we will talk about at length later. That's called Foreshadowing, kids. But horse number 8, Tuscan Sky, started his career going 2 for 2, both over wet tracks. The maiden breaking win, he didn't really beat anything at Aqueduct, but in his first start against winners, he winds up going against, yes, a very short field, but that short field included a very nice horse named Nash, who bounced out of there, won a stakes race, ran fairly well on the Pat Day Mile. If Tuscan Sky runs back to either of those 2 races, I think the race is for second. I am not sold at all whatsoever on Corporate Power. To me, the race 2 back at Gulfstream Park was okay. They shipped him up to Aqueduct, and this is a very, very strange race because Aqueduct, for most of its winter meet, was a fairly slow track. They ran 1 mile and an eighth in 1:48 and 4. That's an outlier for me. I don't think that's an indication that the horses in that race are all that special. I see 9 to 5 on Corporate Power. I see 5 to 2 on Tuscan Sky. I think those should be flip-flopped. There was somebody in the comments that asked if the wrong horse was favored on the morning line. I certainly think so. In a pick 5 like this, if you're playing a budget-friendly ticket, you need at least 1 single, ideally 2. This is one of my 2 singles here. I'm singling Tuscan Sky, and I am hoping he runs back to those 2 races in the mud as opposed to the dud that he ran when he was the second choice in the Wood Memorial.
I'll tell you that I think my handicap is completely invalidated because I just assumed Tuscan Sky was Tuscan Gold or whatever that other Tuscan fucking horse is. So I just assumed that this horse wasn't in here. So I have no idea. Mark, I'll let you go next. Where did you kind of land?
I have nothing to creative to say here. I think I 100% agree with Andrew. Everything Andrew said to a T. The one thing I'll say in here is there's really no pace in this race, and I think when there's really no pace in this race, it even moves up Tuscan Sky more. I mean, he's going to be your pace setter in here, and I don't know what happened in the Wood, but I'll just kind of draw a line through that race, and I think he's by far and away the classiest horse in here. And there's no long layoff or anything else. It's not like something went south or there was a problem. If it was a problem, it was minor. I trust Todd to have that sorted out. So I think Tuscan Sky is probably the most singleable horse in the sequence, at least for me.
Matthew?
Yeah, I wish I could filibuster for longer to give you time to handicap this race again, Josh. But I will say that Tuscan Sky for me is also the most obvious place to single, in my opinion. Getting the blinkers put on, to Mark's point, not a lot of additional speed in this race. So you figure with the blinkers on, the previous form over the sloppy track certainly gives you a lot of confidence. And yeah, I mean, I think that the Wood Memorial is a little bit interesting in that regard to, we saw Deterministic come back and run poorly in the Peter Pan. And I think that horse is probably just distance limited. And I think 2 turns is not what that horse ultimately wants to do. But that said, you saw Resilience, I think, run a much better race than a lot of people expected while being hung and wide most of the way in the Kentucky Derby. That was not a bad effort for him. And I know that there were a lot of people in the Aqueduct offices that at the top of the stretch, when it looked like Resilience was about to make a move, were cheering and hoping perhaps the curse of Husaiti Pegasus was about to be crushed. But so it's interesting to see kind of how that Wood Memorial has come back. But I just think the pace and the class of this horse over a wet track kind of works in his favor. We'll see. I do think Imperial Gun, the second choice, or I guess third choice technically on the morning line, is interesting. If you can kind of go back to run that Bathhouse Row race, although I don't have a very high opinion of Informed Patriot, so I'm not really sure kind of what to make of that effort and kind of where that stacks up in comparison to some of these other horses in the race. And obviously is going to have to make out a trip from that far outside post. Dare I even mention a Ken McPeak horse, as I'm completely and consistently wrong on any of his horses ever, 100% of the time. But I think Gould's Gold at 8-1 could be an interesting horse to use underneath at a little bit of a price. He finished third in that Bathhouse Row after breaking his maiden at 6 furlongs, and another horse of golden scent. So if you believe in perhaps karma or good juju or whatever, McPeak obviously has another son of golden sense running in the Preakness. And, it could be a nice little double there with him and Mystic Dan later in the card. So those are just kind of a couple of thoughts. But, yeah, for me, it was hard to get around Tuscan Sky in this spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, nobody really liked Corporate Power in here as a 9-5 favorite. And, I had, this nice, elegant thing to say about, it's a slow pace, closer winning a slow paced races, being led into these races, all this other stuff. And, I actually thought that we're going to get, I thought that this is a really good opportunity for someone on the front end to steal it. Now, you guys seem to all be going to Tuscan Sky, but hey, let's pretend that Tuscan Sky is not in this race, just as an exercise, right?
I got to tell you here, if something happens and Tuscan Sky scratches leading up to this race, especially if it's after the sequence starts, we're going to need to plot some revenge against you for speaking that into the universe.
I love
but
it.
No, and I get you guys. You guys are crossing a line through that Aqueduct race. Obviously, there was shenanigans in that race. I think that was also one of the days that the track was very biased. So there's a lot of stuff going on where you kind of put a line through it. On Brisnet, it didn't look like the horse regressed all that much. So. Yeah, I mean, I guess, Tuscan Sky, obviously a player in here. I liked Imperial Gun. I thought that with kind of just a race kind of devoid of very natural speed, I thought that he could be one that ends up on the front end. Joel Rosario broke the maiden on this horse at Oaklawn. Basically going wire to wire. Broke out a little bit slow, but was able to get the lead by first call, and then went wire to wire from there. And I think from the 10 post, he really only has one option, I think, and that's to go. Although, frankly, you think Rosario's got one option, and little do you know, he's got a trump card, and he's actually got 7 options. 6 of them you would have never thought of.
By the way, Josh, are you going to be giving that introduction speech for Joel in the Hall of Fame?
They should just play. They should just play what I said on your podcast that first time that you had me on.
That's actually a really good point. I will find that clip somewhere, because that is like, you were like, he is both the most brilliant and the most infuriating jockey I've ever dealt with.
Dude, I just every once in a while I watch his ride on, is it Sir Winston in the Belmont?
Yeah.
And you just watch him and you're like, this guy's gonna stick on the rail. What an idiot. Oh my God, it just opened up for him. It just comes from saves all the ground, and it's ridiculous. Yeah, I tried to make a case for the 9 Daily Grind. Obviously is still a maiden, and like I said, this was purely, hey, who's going to get to the lead? But this horse is so inconsistent. I'm really like the race 2 back was really doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me. Which one that looked like, hey, maybe he kind of gets out there on the front end. But I did think that the 7 horse here, Mighty Message, was another interesting horse. Another one coming in from Oaklawn, one that did sit pretty close up, and is one that started off sprinting and was kind of off of it a little bit, and then Mark's favorite Delta Downs jockey, Vicente Del Cid, gets his horse up on the front end and wins by 2 3/4 lengths. So I don't know. I really thought that Mighty Message might be one that could just maybe inherit this lead in a race that I do think is pretty devoid of a true speed horse. But I mean, Tuscan Sky has Louis Saez aboard. We know Louis likes to get forward. So I think if Tuscan Sky runs back to his race 2 back, I think he's going to be very tough to beat. But I think you can have a couple question marks based off of that Wood effort. And like I said, I know Andrew's just crossing the line through all the horses through the Wood, but I'm like, hey, maybe there's a little truth in there. Maybe something. Maybe he didn't take that step forward off those couple starts. I don't know.
I will say I agree with Andrew that it is amazing that Deposition is running in this race, and that he emerged from that okay, because I remember watching that, and I watched that race with a lot of people, and there was a very hushed tone as soon as that happened, and a very somber walking out, and we were walking through Aqueduct to get back up to where my office is, and there were no TVs and no audio, or there was no audio playing. And we finally got back up to my office, and or where my office is, and another colleague came by and goes, "The horse is okay." And I go, "What do you mean the horse is okay?" And he goes, "Acacia's reporting the horse is okay." And I go, "That's impossible." But you said Acacia reported it, so it's true. And so it was one of those, like, Walter Cronkite said it, so it must be real. And so, I don't know. It's just so fortunate and so lucky that both he and Dexter Haddock were okay in that race. That was a very scary moment. And as much as I like Kendrick Carmouche, yikes, he kind of caused that ride coming over and really cutting Deposition off that day. And that was just a very scary moment. And so it's great to see the horse okay and back and running. So, don't think he gets much of a shot at all in here, but it's just nice to see him running okay.
So one quick thing that's serious and one quick thing that's funny. The serious thing, since we've mentioned Delta Downs, did you hear about the alligator? This is not a dad joke. This is actual something happening.
Yeah, I heard about the alligator.
I heard about the alligator.
For those that didn't hear, the alligator that had taken up residence in the Delta Downs infield went off the property during a storm, and animal control saw fit to kill the alligator. So that's a bummer.
Cool.
That one really sucks.
The gator's been close to being trampled a couple of times now during races, and it was going to happen, and PETA was going to have a field day.
Well, I read that story. I believe it was our friend Caitlin Free that had put that out there and shared it.
Yeah.
That was a bummer. One other thing before we move on, though, we can all agree that the 2023 Wood Memorial was a lot better than the 2024 Wood Memorial, right?
I don't know what happened to Andrew.
I don't know. He must have Verizon and just cut out. Oh, there he is. Okay, he's back. Oh, is he about to cut out again? I don't know.
What happened? My monitor went black.
Goodness. Charles here in the 10th. He likes the 8, the 5, and the 10. So he is on Tuscan Sky, Corporate Power, and Imperial Gun. So he's seeing basically, I think, the way everyone else is seeing. It's the 3 logicals there.
Thank you, Fighting Irish. Appreciate you.
Goodness gracious. Matthew Bicky in the chat. He's got 49723.
I love Matthew, and to Mark's point, he is an infinitely better tournament player than I will ever be. But when I saw that comment, I was like, and I started going back through the PPs. I was like, who the hell are these horses that Matthew likes? And I'm just like, and I was like, I could maybe make a case for 1 or 2, but man, I do not see this race the same way that Matthew does. But that's okay. But I mean, it's as I mentioned at the top, you got to zig where others are going to zag, and he's doing that.
You had a little major league moment there.
Yeah, I
Ricky
did.
Vaughn?
Yeah.
Vaughn.
This guy here is dead. Cross him off then.
Exactly.
I will say I did use I have his 2 written down as a C type that I may have a tiny bit of coverage to. So,
all right. Anything else on this race? God, I hope. Well, I don't want to wish for a horse to scratch, but man, it's going to be funny if Tuscan Sky scratches. Race 11, the turf sprint. The Jim McKay turf sprint here. We're going to be going 5 furlongs on the turf. This was a race where, I looked and I saw that our the 5-2 morning line favorite is Beer Can Man. And, I think I probably wrote a letter to Beer Can Man a couple starts ago, and luckily, he's I wrote that breakup letter, just never again. And I am not going back to that well. I think that this is the short price favorite. I'm going to try to get around the most in this sequence, and I just don't want any part of it. This is just a horse that doesn't like to win, and it stinks because he seems to always be very, very competitive. He came back to that Shakertown this year, and he's generally fired okay fresh off the layoff, and just didn't have it there. And so maybe it's kind of gotten past him a little bit here. So I'm definitely going to be fading the 12 Beer Can Man in this spot. So I ended up on 2. I got 3 horses written down in total here. My top pick, and was actually my long shot play of the sequence on Drank and Champagne earlier this week, and that's the 9. That's right. Unfortunately, not an E8, but an E6, and that's close enough for me. I'm looking kind of back at this horse's races, and obviously, won the Turf Monster in 2022, and then kind of just seemed to go off form after that for a bit. Obviously, bounce between Michael Moore's barn and Jenna Antonucci, and it just seems like that last start at Laurel kind of got him back on the right track there. So I'm gonna go back to it. I think this is the speed of the speed in this race, and if Andy Hernandez can get this horse out clean, I think that he can get out there on the front end, and it might be tough to catch. And obviously 15-1 is a really, really great price. Of the I guess shortest price horses, I kind of like the 11 Witty the most, and that's mostly coming off of a This horse is coming in off great form. Obviously, since coming into Elizabeth Merriman's barn, I believe Andrew talked pretty heavily about this horse on our pod. But yeah, he even brought it up. I mean, this horse has been won 4 of his last 5 races since switching barns. Maybe a little bit of question about 5 furlongs, but he won the Ben's Cat, going 5 furlongs here at Pimlico. So definitely does have some past form going this space or going this distance. And the last horse I'm going to talk about is old war horse, Karatari, number 2 horse. And this horse is 2 for 2 at Pimlico. Obviously, we're turning back the time machine, going back to when he was a 6-year-old, winning the Laurel Dash, wire to wire with Kendrick Caramouche aboard, when Laurel was not running, and they were running these races here at Pimlico, and basically since that race has not won a race. So this is definitely a horse that has not won in a while, but this is a horse that's got 10 career wins. All 9 of them on the turf, and I believe I don't know if they're all at 5, but they're all at 5 or 5.5. So this is definitely a specialist in this spot, and it was 2 years ago, but was at the time one of the best turf sprinters going, and you get, in my humble opinion, probably the best, if not one of the top 2 turf sprint jocks in the country in Louis Saez aboard. I think that Louis is going to get the most out of this horse. He's got a nice inside draw. Horse has been working pretty well, and I really do think that this is a great spot for Karatari. Maybe this is more of an underneath type, but I have this horse written down as a B, and it's going to be 1-1. I have a little bit of coverage too in the pick 5. So I have the 9 and 11 as my A's, and then I have the 2 Karatari as my lone B. Mark, where did you land?
You're talking about the first race where we landed on all the same horses, and this will not be the case in this race because we are on completely different horses in this one. Can Beer Can Man win this race? Yeah, he can, but he's my I don't know. I guess the reference would be he's my Juan Hernandez as is to Caleb, the horse I just can never get on the right side of. I think I bet Beer Can Man every time he runs, and I just never bet him whenever he wins, albeit he doesn't really win that often. But I think the biggest issue with Beer Can Man is this draw is just brutal for him, and this is a unique distance. This is 5 furlongs as opposed to the normally what we see 5.5. Now Beer Can Man has done very well at this. He's what, 6 for 13 going this trip. So 6 of his 7 wins. But, I think the draw just is really, really tough for him. Flavien Prat's going to have to figure out a way of saving some ground, not being 10 wide around the corner in a really condensed field, and kind of making that, keeping him out of trouble and getting a clean trip. And that's just going to be really hard to do, I think, in this big field. The other 2 horses that I was very interested in are quite larger prices, and that's going to be the 1 Grooms All Business to start off with. This is another one of those horses that has 4 lifetime wins. All 4 of them happen to be going this trip, and it seems like he can get 5 furlongs but can't get 5.5, which is a really weird distinction to make, but seems to be the trip he wants. Coming in off some really good form. Had some good wins last year, and again, this is his first start in a bit of time, but trainer that fires really well off the long layoff. So I think he's a really interesting horse in here. If he brings his A game, which he seems to do when he's going 5. And the other horse that I thought was kind of interesting was the 8 horse Boats a Rockin', who is another one of these that really seems to kind of relish this 5 furlong trip. And if you're a form cycle person, I think I talk about this probably, well, Caleb and I both talk about this quite a bit, but probably myself more than anybody else. These every other type horses, this is one of them. Every other race, he seems to fire a big one. Should be sitting on a real nice effort here. and is a horse that's again going to be part of that early pace complexion, right around the lead, and see if I don't know if he can necessarily pass other horses, but one that should be in it from you'll at least get your thrills. Let's put it that way.
Matthew.
Yeah, so I guess I see it a little bit of a combination of the both of you. So Witty is my top choice, the number 11 horse. And by the way, if for some reason this race were to come off the dirt, I mean, he's still a viable option, or the turf, I should say. He's a viable option to run on the dirt as well, as he's got good dirt races there. Yeah, I thought this horse, came back from a 4-month layoff and ran one of his better races, and got the win going 5.5, and is a horse that does like to come from off the pace. But if you go back and look, the horse has some tactical speed. Obviously he's going to have to work out the trip with Tyler Gaffney on a board from the outside post. But like I said, I just think, the fact that he came back from a pretty significant layoff and fired an 87 Beyer speed figure would indicate to me that he has the ability to move forward from there a little bit in his next start. And, looking back at his other form, that he has 90 plus Beyer speed figure efforts in his back pocket that he could run back to. I think that makes him rather dangerous in this spot. So I do like the number 11 quite a bit, but my second choice, and a horse I really kind of hem and hawed about in terms of whether I should include him up top or not, is the number 1 Grooms All Business at 8-1. Duarte is really good at getting these horses ready off the bench. And there was another horse, I think it was Subrogate, like a month or two ago, that he brought back from the bench. And what is interesting about the way he brings horses back is these 52-second 4 furlong workouts, which is normally like people see that and they're like, this horse needs one off the bench. These are really slow. Where's the bullets? Blah, blah, blah. He works these horses out intentionally slow, and he works these horses out so that you don't see it coming. This is the exact same workout pattern he's had in the past that has been very effective off the bench. So I just think this horse, has some good races to come back to, and I think can fire off the bench effectively. We've seen this horse run pretty well both times it's come back from a break before. So I think this one at 8-1, first time gelding as well. That's not an angle I always use, but it's one that I know some people really believe in. Maggie Wolfendale, I know, and Andy B. and Cohn both talk about that first time gelding angle being one that it can be really important, particularly in these sprints. Karotari, Josh, I almost went back to that horse for sentimental value because I was there 2 years ago when this horse won the last time. So at Laurel. And so I kind of feel obligated to support him in some way. It's just, I wonder if time just has kind of caught up with him a little bit, and that, at 8 years old, he's just not quite the same horse he used to be at 6 and younger. So that's been a little bit of an issue there. And then the horse that I'll mention that I don't know why this horse kind of didn't get a lot of more love is the number 6 Smooth B. And if it's a wet turf course, I saw what this horse did on a wet turf course at the Parks Turf Monster, which I referenced earlier. This horse beat Roses for Deborah that day, who is one of the better turf sprinters we have. And it's because this horse has exceptional early speed and was just simply out there and they were running on a conveyor belt. And I could see the exact same thing happening. Now, he's going to be more of an underneath play for me in this spot, but I think at that price, he's a really nice horse that can enrich your exactas trifectas because he doesn't run bad on turf. This horse, no, he doesn't win. He's 0 for 14 winning. He's also 7 for 14 hitting the board. So, he runs some decent races in there. And again, as an underneath play strictly, I don't hate him in this spot. And I tend to trust Butch Reed on these types. So that was one that I just wanted to give a little bit of love to that might get passed over by others.
Yeah, the other Matthew, Mr. Matthew Bickey, had the 6 as his top pick in here. So yep. You're in good hands there. Obviously, he also liked the 2 Karotari, the 10 and the 9, and that is Charging, and that's right. Charles likes the 10 Charging as well as the 11 Witty. So that's 2 real sharp guys, both Charles and Matthew. They both like this 10 Charging. Any of you guys remotely interested in this horse?
I have Charging Mark down as a horse that I may want to have a little exposure to. I just sort of thought that his best efforts were a bit of a cut below this field. That was my main issue.
Yeah, I'll let Andrew kind of chime in with his thoughts for this race.
I appreciate you setting me up because I don't think Josh wanted to after what happened last time. So I mentioned that if you're playing this pick 5 on a budget, you need at least one single, preferably 2. Witty's a single for me in here. I see a lot of horses that want to go early. I see a lot of horses that don't want to pass other horses. I see a lot of horses that are used to running on Lasix that don't get Lasix in this spot. Witty is an informed closer. Check that box. Has won 4 of the last 5 starts. Check that box. Does not need Lasix in order to run well. Check. Also, from the standpoint of value, shouldn't be favored. Beer Can Man, I think, is going to be favored. I don't know if you're going to get 9-2 on Witty. I think 3-1, 7-2 is probably a little bit more accurate. But I look at this horse, I see a lot, and I mean a lot to like. I think you're looking at a horse that is going to get everything he wants as far as a pace setup in front of him. And I think he's going to be going the right way when a lot of early speed horses that some of you have been talking about have the warning lights flashing around the 8th pole. Witty for me is maybe the horse that I am the second most excited to have some exposure to on the Saturday card at Pimlico. To me, this is just a case where the race shape lines up with, in my opinion, the most talented horse. You guys mentioned Boats A Rockin', horse number 8 in the program. That's the one that intrigues me a little bit underneath. This is a horse that's been off 6 months. I am not overly familiar with the Brandon Colt barn, but this is a horse that has run some very big races. And one of you mentioned the good race, bad race pattern. I would argue that the only poor race this horse has run was in the Parks Dash last August. If you cross off that race, all of a sudden you're left with a very consistent animal. I'm just not sure how ready he's going to be off of a layoff of 6 months, but a repeat of the last out effort where he was second at a big price behind a very nice turf sprinter named Nothing Better, who loves that Aqueduct turf course. Mm-hmm. Boats A Rockin' could absolutely be a contender in this spot. I think he might be a bit pace compromised though, whereas Witty is going to have exactly the setup he wants.
Okay, Andrew, I got to ask you, are you really worried about the front end falling off a 5 furlong turf race sprint?
When there are 12 horses in the race and 8 of them want the lead?
By the way, Andrew has been replaced by Chase, who has never seen a sprint race that he does not believe is going to collapse. And every single closer is live. And by the way, Chase will generate race scenarios that I just don't see on paper, but I love it.
No, it's
I just don't see this coming apart. I mean, I don't think these turf sprints, especially going 5, ever come apart. And I mean, I know you want to check a lot of boxes with Witty, but you can check the also box of Witty's best race just isn't fast enough to win this race. And it's going to take a ton of money for all those reasons you mentioned. So, I don't want to refer to the horse as a takeout reducer, but I think this is a horse that probably takes a lot more money than his chances of winning the races are.
A takeout reducer. We're using the takeout reducer term on this horse? A horse that's won 4 of the last 5 starts? Ouch, man.
Who needs to find about 10 points of speed on time for him to be a major player in here? Off the best effort.
I'm somewhat surprised that nobody has mentioned number 7 yet. And that Josh didn't have like 3 cherries by this horse because...
Well, it's an E6. It's not an E8.
Well, that's true. It is an E6. But this seems like the type of horse that Josh would be like, I think that's... and it's interesting. So it's really interesting to look at the Brisnet numbers that you have up there, Josh, because the horse really doesn't look much different in that last start over the turf. But when you look at the buyer speed figures, this horse made a pretty significant jump the last time out, and certainly the last 2 times out. And I don't think this horse has any chance at winning at all going off Lasix, but he's going to be a major pace presence in this race. And I just wonder if he just, kind of runs so fast, I guess maybe to the point that Andrew and I are hoping that it's going to happen, that, he kind of wears things down a little bit on the front end for a horse coming from off the pace. But turf sprints, I would argue this is probably at least for me personally, this is one of the toughest divisions to handicap consistently because I just the form is so variable. I feel like sometimes, and there are such unique shooters that come into these different races, and it's almost like handicapping the long distance dirt races, like that Next wins by 25 lengths. That makes it easy because Next is just better than everybody else. But otherwise, it's not like you see turf sprints every single day in terms of graded stakes turf races, turf sprints. And so, the Caravels of the world kind of stick out, and Roses for Deborah and horses like that. So I don't know. I've always struggled with turf sprints a little bit. I think they're so variable from track to track because what works at Gulfstream Park doesn't work up at Aqueduct.
Yeah, I actually thought the 9 was faster than the 7. So that's why
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, the 7 is taking a massive class increase. So I when they actually all line up in a row, I doubt the 7 is actually going to be fastest. But it's just when I saw it initially on the PPs, I was like, oh, I bet Josh is going to like this horse. So.
Anything else in this race? I mean, I agree.
I will echo that comment right there. I'm very happy you put that 100%. In there. Chaos, absolute unadulterated chaos. And that's what I think we're going to wind up with here, with a whole bunch of horses going early, and we're hoping that Whitty just swoops the rest of the field. So if we're moving on to the dinner party, can the editor among us potentially point something out? This one's kind of funny. Can you do me a favor, Josh? One of the last lines of the race description. So the Dinner Party Stakes is the first leg of the First Racing Turf Challenge. If the same horse wins the Dinner Party Stakes, the California Crown January Turf, and the misspelled Pegasus World Cup Turf, it gets better than that, as funny as that is. The winning owner will receive, Josh, how many zeros are in that bonus?
Is that $25 million bonus with the comma in the wrong spot?
So, yes. Somebody had better hope nobody sweeps that series. Any lawyers out there? Any litigious types? I'm just saying.
Let's screenshot that.
Is it the same on DRF or is it just?
I don't know. I have the Briz form in front of me right now, but I got to tell you, this is one of those things that gets me as
on DRF.
It is. Yeah, it gets me as a racing person, and this is one of those things that's going to turn into like an honest to God question. If we can't get the little stuff right, how can we be trusted to get the big stuff right? Come on, people.
I think you're too negative, Andrew.
Yeah, trust me, you're not alone. There are going to be trolls out there. They're going to be picketing outside my apartment in about an hour.
I'm just wondering, have you ever...
We know that talking about the problem is the problem.
Yes.
And that's the problem. So we need to not talk about the problem.
Clearly, yes. We don't talk about Bruno here.
By the way, Matthew, I don't know if you saw, but there was some feedback for one of your coworkers in chat, so I'm sure
I noticed.
And on to the dinner party.
Yeah. We're going to be going 1 mile and 1/8 on the turf, and it's a grade 3. And Andrew, I thought you made a really good point last race, and I hate that I just said that, but. It's kind of the same way I looked at the sequence, right? I was gonna try and make a tough decision in one spot, right? You're saying, hey, you try and look for a single, everybody's favorite man to hate on Twitter. Well, one of the very many hated and loved or loved, depending on who you are. Mr. Inside the Pylons says that you want to make hurdles for yourself, right? And in this spot, I thought that there are probably about 4 or 5 horses I think they can probably win this race. But I felt pretty strongly about one of them. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to plant my flag and I'm going to single in this race. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to single the 5 Running B in this spot. For Chad Brown and Tyler Gaffleone. I believe he's the second choice in this race. There is I believe who's the favorite in there? Emmanuel at 5-2. And I'll tell you what, man. Mark used this term a little bit earlier. I'm gonna go right back to that well. And I think Emmanuel is an absolute takeout reducer in this spot. You know, I can't believe that at a certain point, Matthew, I believe this was at for 4-star Dave. I was about to make Emmanuel my top pick, and I swerved.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I swerved and I went with a different horse.
You went with the Litter Rice horse, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the speed, the cheap speed. I stuck to my brand. And you know, the entire time right before that, I'm like, I'm gonna pick Emmanuel. I think Emmanuel's, and then I didn't. And you know, sure enough, he still freaking loses that race. But I mean, this is just a horse that doesn't like to win. And when he does win, he wins on turf courses that I think it would be very generous to call a turf course. And that's both Gulfstream Park and sorry, Matthew, Belmont Park. You know, I mean, I think that those are not not our traditional like turf courses like we have.
Can I
like
jump in with my description of those courses?
Yes, go for it.
Green pavement.
There you go. And yeah, I just think that this is a horse that you got to play against. I mean, like, could he win? Like, sure, but you're not going to get a square price on this horse. You're not going to get, I think, what is a fair price on this horse. I think that this horse is going to be way over bet. And, you know, if I'm going to stick my money behind the short price, I think I'm going to go with Running B. And this is a horse that, since that Fort Lauderdale, like, it is, I think, almost kind of the inverse, right, of what we see with Emmanuel, right? This horse went to Gulfstream and just did not run a lick, right? But you look at his Aqueduct race, you look at his Tampa race, you look at his Keeneland race, and the horse looks great. Go back before the layoff, and also won a nice race at Keeneland. Yeah, I just think that this horse appreciates an actual lush turf course, is going to get it here, I think, at Pimlico. And there might even be a little bit of cut in the ground with the rain. And I think that you kind of move Running B even up even more because of that. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm putting all my money behind Running B in this spot. You know, I honestly, I'd probably take as short as 5-2 on this horse. But yeah, I think that this is going to be my top pick, and it's a lone A, and I think it's a stone cold single for me in this spot. Andrew, where did you land here?
Sure. The only thing that scares me about Running B, and I've said this for a couple of different horses for a couple of different reasons, it's the Lasix factor. If you look at only the Lasix races for Running B, he's 4 for 5 with a second, and that second place finish was behind a horse in Capensis who, in that particular race, ran an absolute hole in the wind. People thought they were seeing the next big freak of turf racing. So that would be the one thing that scares me a little bit. Having said that, he ran okay 2 starts ago at Tampa without Lasix. I think he's fine without Lasix. I'm using him, but I don't think he's quite the single that you do. I will be using him. He's an A for me. If he winds up winning, I'll be very happy. But there's a reason that I'm going a total of 5 deep with a couple of Bs in there. The horse that I mentioned on our show earlier this week was horse number 1, Highland Chief. I would like Highland Chief a little bit more if the race was a little bit longer, but I'm a sucker for the toss 2 angle. And that's when a horse runs a clunker, goes to the sidelines for a little while, and then the most recent effort, the horse clearly needs a race. Look at those 2 races from Highland Chief, where the effort 2 back was in the Breeders' Cup turf against the likes of Rebels Romance, Stone Age, and Warlike Goddess. Horse is then off for a year and a half, and then he runs like he needs a race, going 1.5 miles in the Elkhorn. If that's your first start in a year and a half, that's a pretty ambitious spot. Highland Chief for me is a use. Running B is a use. And there's a horse that Jimmy mentioned in the comments that was a stone cold single for him. That's horse number 9, Beatbox. That's the 3rd A for me. I think there's just a chance that he didn't particularly have a great trip last time out in the Muniz when I'm very busy, ran a hole in the wind. That, by the way, is another all-time way better with Lasix horse. But the races before that, in a $100,000 stakes race 4 back, he runs second, beaten by the last Arlington Million winner, a horse named 2 Emmys, who was very good. He then runs second, beaten ahead by Strong Quality, who won an undercard race on the Kentucky Derby Day undercard. I have no idea how Kapuna does not get by in that particular instance. That cost me some money. That's been replaying in my nightmares. The race 2 back wins a grade 3 over soft going. There's cutting the ground. Beatbox isn't going to have a problem. Joel Rosario knows this horse. I will be using that one. My 2Bs, well, they're both odd-numbered horses as well. I'm using number 3, Balnikov, although I think this horse just likes running second and third. I can't ignore first-time Frankie Dettori on the turf in a race that has some pace to it. I think there's every chance Dettori winds up unlocking a horse's potential on the grass. He's done that before. I've made money on that before. I need to at least have him on the ticket. And I also need to have number 7 Adamo on the ticket as well. This is a horse that has not won in quite a while, but has also been running against much, much, much better horses for most of that stretch. So for me, it's 5 odd-numbered horses. Horses 1, 5, and 9 are A's, 3 and 7 are B's, and the other odd-numbered horse, the 11 Eons, would probably be a C for me. I don't usually play C's, but I think that one needed the last race, and Arnaud Delacour is very, very good with horses second off the bench. That one's going to be a big price if you're looking for one.
Matthew.
Yeah, so I will say that I have a roommate that is in complete agreement with you, Josh, on singling the number 5 English B. And so that's good company to be in my opinion.
Running B, you mean? English B is the 2. And by the way, shout out to Dave Rothman, who hopefully doesn't get tripped up by that.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, I confused 2 horses in 2 completely different races.
Right. So no, running B though. Running B is my top choice in this race as well. Again, looking at this race, going back to Mark's initial point that he brought up at the very beginning about how do we think about how a turf course plays when it takes a lot of water. Typically, you want to look at horses that are going to be pretty forward. This is one of those horses that's going to be pretty forward. For me, Emmanuel is that takeout reducer and just a horse I have a hard time trusting, particularly at the morning line price. A little stat for you. Todd Pletcher, the last 5 years, 3 for 23 at Pimlico, 1 for 14 in graded stakes races. The average price of those 14 graded stakes runners was 5-1. There were 2 absolute long shots in there. If you look at the other 12, they're 1 for 11 with the average price of 7-2. Needless to say, Todd does not get his horses ready for Pimlico. Shocking development there, I know. He's focused on bigger and better things. So if they win those races, great, but that's not what he's focused on. So for me, English B, I think just makes a lot of sense. Love that last race. And as others have mentioned, runs well with a little cut in the ground. So I have no problem with that. And the bad effort, the Fort Lauderdale, fine. I'm willing to draw a line through that. And then Kentucky Downs, I'm willing to draw a line through that, whether a horse runs good or bad, because quite frankly, that is not form that, in my opinion, typically travels to other courses. Now, a horse could be very good and win at Kentucky Downs and win somewhere else. But if I see something anomalous about a horse at Kentucky Downs, I just go, that's Kentucky Downs. And it's just different than everywhere else. So that's kind of where I was thinking in this race. I do like the number 1 Highland Chief quite a bit. So I'm with you on this one, Andrew. I'm a Grand Motion fan. I just unapologetically for that. And while I agree with you that I think longer is what's better for this horse, he does have at least some tactical speed in those marathon races. I don't know how that translates here. I do wonder if he appreciates maybe a little bit more pace to run into in a shorter race sometimes. And I absolutely agree with you. The Elkhorn, he just needed one off the bench. And that was a sizable layoff that he had. And you go back and look at those other races, he ran huge efforts before that race that sent him to the bench. So I think he makes a lot of sense in here. 12-1 on the morning line price. I don't think you'll get that because I think a lot of people will see some potential there and see some of those past figures and use this horse. The other one that I'll mention is the number 12, Fantastic Again. And this is a horse I didn't really know what to do with. I ended up including him in my top 4. But he's got to work out the trip from the far outside post, obviously. Has a lot of speed. Will be up on the front. I don't know if he likes turf as much as he likes synthetic, and Turfway Park in particular. But I also don't know if it's just he matured between 3 and 4, which happens and happens regularly. So perhaps he's just a little bit of a new horse. I know in Brisnet the numbers don't look that different, but if you look at Beyer, he really has kind of unlocked something new in those last 2 races, running at 95, 96 the last 2 times out, and had been really running in the low 80s to mid 80s as a 3-year-old. So maybe he just unlocked something new as he matured over the winter and into the spring. We'll have to wait and see, but that's another one at 12-1. Listen, Johnny Velasquez on a speed horse. Yes, please. I'll take that every single time. So I think those are the horses that I was kind of taking a look at in this race. But I'm with you. I have running B, not English B, as my top choice.
Matthew, I have to tell you that Todd Pletcher tidbit was a very interesting track stat. You should be doing videos on things, track stat related as part of your day job. I feel like you'd be really, really good at that.
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me. And I appreciated Josh's little bravo, very nice, very nice.
Sure. When Matthew lives up to his gimmick, he gets applause. When I live up to my gimmick, I get kicked out of the show.
Our good friend Jessica Tugwell is right there with you on Fantastic Again. I'll just highlight her comment again. She says, Fantastic Again is pretty interesting to me, at least underneath. Looks like an improving horse. Might be a synth specialist, but I just keep coming back to him. Should be tactical. And I've got a lot of respect for Najarok, who he chased over this course last year. Love Johnny getting on again. And look at this. Look at this positivity here. Keith, each and every stride, saying good points on Fantastic Again, Jessica. Love to see it.
This is becoming a very positive live stream tonight.
Burning.
Yeah, it is very positive.
It's okay. Somebody on Twitter just told me to go F myself. So, that's...
Oh, there we go. It balances out. Life is all about balance, right? The yin and yang, right? Mark, who do you got here?
Yeah, I will have no part of Emmanuel. He'll be on none of my tickets for all the aforementioned reasons. I think he wants his turf as firm as it comes, and I just think he's I think Josh said takeout reducer, and I'm not going to disagree there. I like Josh's running B quite a lot. Horse that makes a ton of sense here. And one that I think is you would be remiss to leave off tickets. My top choice in this race is Highland Chief, the one you guys have already talked up and down Highland Chief. But, I really wonder if, obviously off the long layoff, something went wrong. But I really wonder, Graham Motion is as smart as they come trainer-wise. And was this really what he was pointing for all along? His horses often do need to start off the long layoff. He does much better second off. So, I think coming back in this spot is a little interesting distance-wise. I think it was maybe Andrew who mentioned that. But, I do like Highland Chief quite a lot in here, and he's going to be my top pick. And then I know you guys had mentioned Eons. I actually have him marked down as an A. And I think the reason is sometimes these types of horses that provide such a value proposition are worth it to take a shot at as an A. And I think he's that type. If you look at his career form, he's fired by far and away his best efforts second off the layoff, which he is here, and by far and away his best efforts on softer going, which he's going to get here. So you're getting kind of 2 thumbs up. This is going to be the best effort you're going to get out of him. Very sharp barn. And connections all the way around have some absolutely filthy statistics. Delacour and Carrasco are 26% together over the last year with a $2.90 ROI. And they are 60% together at Pimlico. So, and also Delacour is also like 30% second off the long layoff. So I think this one's going to be primed, ready to go, and he's getting in the conditions of the second off that he's going to love. So at a big price, I think Eons is extremely interesting here.
Mark, you did bring up a really good point, and this is something that I talked with a real good friend of mine, real sharp handicapper, Kevin Strom. He finished second in the BCBC last year, and when talking about structuring tickets, and it's funny, Mark, we've gotten a ton of feedback on people want to talking about structuring tickets and how to build a ticket, and I've been trying to think of ideas on how to do how to, I guess, teach it, because I feel like it's more art than science in some ways. But I was talking to him, and when he sees a horse like this, right, like a 20-1, 15-1 on the morning line, one that he thinks is going to be a long price, but he really likes that horse. He treats like that horse is actually 3-1, 4-1, and he plays it as such, right? So while it's a long shot, he's got it so leveraged up that when it hits, like he's gonna hit, right? And so he's posted tickets where like he's basically played a 10-1, 15-1 horse like it's a 4 to 5-1, and it just pays absolute boxcar. So that I think
Also
that's a good point.
Yeah, I was also very good friends with Kevin. Great guy. I hang out with him at Saratoga quite a lot. And, but I agree. It's one of those situations. If you're seeing a horse that's 21 on the morning line, but you think wins the race every, 1 in every 10 times, why would you not treat it like that? You're going to only hit that wager, 1 in 10 times. But when you do, you're going to get a much more outsized payout. So we're all looking for ROI, not cashing tickets at a high percentage rate. We would be much more concerned with ROI. And that's how you generate ROI, is by leveraging up those types of horses.
Yeah, I did see someone in the chat. Chris Womack here had said nobody on the 4, and that's a tone.
That horse kills me. I love a tone, and a tone used to be like my standby stable duel horse, because he used to be a horse that was like always like 12-1 on the morning line, and that would take money and then run second, and I would get like a lot of points for a really inexpensive horse on the morning line because of the fixed odds of stable duel. But man, that horse just, every time I think that horse is going to run big, he doesn't. And every time I'm like, then he runs a lot better. So he maybe, to Chris's point, he probably wins the race for fun now, because I don't really see this horse. I don't know. I don't see it in the recent form for me. He just is a hard one to trust.
Yeah, that was my same take as well. This isn't 2022 anymore, when a tone was, a much different horse. I think his best stuff is kind of behind him. He just doesn't win anymore. Now, if you wanted to build around him underneath, it's a 10-1. You're going to probably get a little value there, but he always takes money on the name recognition factor. So he's going to be over bet, I think, relative to his chances of winning.
I will say, I think it is a little promising that he seems to be rounding, or at least his last start was pretty good. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't looked at time form or buyer to see what that Kentucky Cup came back. But finishing second to Cellist, right? Yeah. Not too shabby, and I think
came back strong. It was a 96 buyer. 96
yeah, and buyer. So I think coming into this race, I mean, he's 7, right? So he is getting a little long in the tooth, but we've definitely seen 7 and even 8-year-olds going long on the turf, like still fire pretty big. So, and I will say, like, yeah, channel maker, good. The interesting thing about a tone, and one of the things I thought was going to really help him out, and it just didn't pan out, was he seemed to be one that had absolutely no problem running long on the turf without Lasix. Right, yeah. He won that Pegasus World Cup turf, and I thought that was going to be kind of the turning point for him, and he hasn't seemed to win since then. But I do feel like the last couple of races have shown at least a little bit more improvement, and I think I don't think he's that far off the rest of them here. I just, like, honestly, I really liked Running B that much that I didn't really give anybody else much of a look.
Really quick before we move on, I just want to shout out Matt Bickey in the chat for the reference to the Tin Man, who was a heck of a turf horse out here in California for a very long time.
Really cool horse.
He was the horse that I believe set the pace in the Breeders' Cup turf that was decided in a dead heat with Johar and High Chaparral with Falbrava in that mix too. Yeah. That's a really fun race if anybody out there is looking for an old replay to watch. And yes, Stephanie has it exactly right about who it was that told me I should spend time fornicating myself. So thank you for that, and thank you for the follow too, by the way. Appreciate that.
By the way, Andrew, Josh has no clue that any of those horses ever existed.
I thought he was trying to say that Tone had no heart. So
boo yourself right
I refuse.
now.
I refuse.
Jeez.
Anything?
You've made Mark leave. You've made Mark leave. You see what you've done? Do you see what you've done?
Anything else on this race?
Nope.
Let's see what else we got in here. Do anyone think we covered most?
Yeah, I just I will. What I'll say about Balkanov is my general handicapping perspective, and there are exceptions, obviously, that just as there are to any rule, is West Coast turf horses get tossed at short prices. I'll use the West Coast turf horse if it's a big price, and I'll go, hey, maybe this horse runs a little bit better than people think. But I have a hard time accepting any West Coast turf horse, and I have a lot of respect for Phil D'Amato's barn, and obviously we just saw him run Stronghold, to I think a pretty respectable finish in the Kentucky Derby, but I just do not trust that West Coast form coming east at all on the turf. So I just always have a hard time supporting those horses at anything below like 8-1.
Yeah, and Matthew Bickey is with both of you guys here on the one Highland Chief. So,
Yeah.
if Mr. Oh my God, why am I blanking? Oh, Mr. Betmix, Matthew Bickey likes the one, and you guys using your old school forms also like the one. I'm guessing that the one's going to take a bit of money, but
I also think the 12 is going to take some money. I think Fantastic Again is going to take a little bit of cash. I think this morning, this line's going to move around a little bit. Because I think Emmanuel is going to go off below 5-2. This will be an interesting one to see where people end up at post time, because I don't know where this one is going to be.
The real question is if they get rain, does Emmanuel even run? I honestly think they'll scratch him. I think if they get rain, he gets scratched, and then it's a much different picture from who's at what odds, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would have to assume it would have to be a lot worse than we think it's going to be now for them to take this one off the turf, because this is the one that they would presumably I don't keep on the turf.
I don't think that they take the race off the turf. I think that they scratch Emmanuel if it's not absolutely
I see what you mean.
fast.
Yeah.
I think if I remember correctly, he has been scratched before on soft.
He has,
and he's never really run well over it. So I think they're going to see the weather forecast and just say, "We'll go find a different spot somewhere."
Yeah, just like the other Pletcher horse is going to scratch Tuscan Sky or whatever.
And then they're going to scratch Kingsbarns the day before. And they're going to scratch. Everybody's going to scratch.
Tuscan Gold, God bless. All right, so we're moving on to the big one here, the Preakness. Obviously, big scratch of the 4 Muth in this spot, and we still got a field of 8 here, Matthew, I'll let you go first here. What's your opinion on this race?
Yeah, obviously, you guys know I have a lot of opinions on this race and a lot of opinions on the horses that are running, as I think we all do, because we've seen these horses run a lot over the last several months. And so my ultimate top pick ended up being Tuscan Gold, who is not scratching out at this race. And he is a horse that just fits the Chad Brown profile to a T. And, lightly raced horse, ascending speed figures, skips the Derby. Now, in this case, he didn't qualify for the Derby, but in the case of both cloud computing and early voting, skips the Derby. Blazing 7 skips the Derby and comes to the Preakness fresh. And I think this is a horse that has yet to run his best race. And those are horses that I always like betting, because I like betting on upside and I like betting on potential in these spots, because typically you can find value. Now, the problem is with the scratch and Muth, you're not going to get any value with Tuscan Gold. I thought at one point maybe you'd get 5-1, 6-1, because the 8-1 morning line price was always a pipe dream. But I thought you might get a little bit of value. I don't know how much of that you get now. I think this horse has better tactical speed than people give him credit for. I know Chase, our good friend Chase Sessoms, thinks, this horse needs a setup. I don't think he needs a setup. I think he can sit that kind of tracking trip. And doesn't need there to be any sort of pace meltdown in this particular race. Here's kind of my thoughts on this. If you compare last year's race to this year's race, I think Mystic Dan is better than Mage. I think Tuscan Gold is better than Blazing Sevens, and I think National Treasure is a whole lot better than Imagination. So those are kind of my three opinions on this race. So based upon those three opinions, I kind of ended up landing on Tuscan Gold. I think Mystic Dan certainly could end up winning this. It would not shock me at all if he were to win the second leg here. I think he's going to be able to get that inside rail trip that he really likes, because the inside three horses to him have zero speed. So he should be able to, Brian Hernandez should do exactly what he did in the Kentucky Derby and just make a left-hand turn out of the gate and get over there to the rail and let this horse enjoy the slop and enjoy the inside move that he liked to use both in the Derby and in the Southwest Stakes. So I think that horse certainly makes a lot of sense. Wouldn't blame anybody for overthinking it and just going with Mystic Dan. But for me, Tuscan Gold was a horse that I just think ran a really good Louisiana Derby on what was, a pretty good field behind Catching Freedom and Honor Marie. And we saw the sixth place horse in that race, Antiquarian, come back and win the Peter Pan last weekend. So, I think that race had some really good runners in it. And I'll even go so far to say, I think Track Phantom, remember, out of all the horses running on the front end, Track Phantom ran the best race Fierceness dropped back to 15th. Just Steel dropped back to 17th. Track Phantom went to 11th. Wasn't great, but it was better than what the others did. So, that surprised me a little bit because I didn't have the highest opinion of Track Phantom going into that race. But, I ended up on him. I just don't have a lot of confidence in the D. Wayne Lucas horses. And we can talk about that later if we want, but I don't want to, overstate things or kind of just be repetitive with some of the things I've said before. But yeah, for me, it was Tuscan Gold. And I just think Imagination for Bob Baffert, that horse just is finding ways to lose races and just wants so desperately to lose races that I just have a hard time using him, even if the track is setting up potentially for a gate to wire winner.
Yeah, and I did see Gary Calaroso in chat said more racing luck for Mystic Dan, no moose, wet track, and clear shot to get to the rail. I echo basically everything you said. I think that Mystic Dan's obviously not in here without a shot. Using him, I have him as a B. Matthew, I think on Imagination, you mentioned he just finds ways to lose races and stuff. And, fortunately, I like losing money. I hate money. Absolutely hate money.
You admitting it. Thank you, Josh.
I hate money. Andrew tells me I hate money on a consistent basis. I have Imagination as my lone A in this spot. Matthew, I think I really like the way you kind of painted the picture of this race, comparing it to last year, because I do view Imagination, I think, similar to how National Treasure kind of came into this race. And the thing is that, while I think you might be correct in the quality of the horse not being the same as National Treasure, I really don't think the quality of this crop matches up to the quality of last year's crop either. And I just think that the pace scenario is just, absolutely in Imagination's favor. If he can't win this race, he's got to go back to the West Coast.
He's walking home.
He's got to go back to the West Coast and stick to those 4-horse races where no one dare pass a Bob Baffert horse, because this horse has every right and every single reason to win this race with the scratch and moose. There's absolutely no reason this horse shouldn't win this race. That being said, I have 2 Bs as well because, I hate money. I hate money, yeah, but I don't hate money that much. So Mystic Dan, I will definitely use. I do think it feels pretty square to use Mystic Dan as a B, but I guess personal handicapping wise, I think that's kind of where he belongs. But I think. And Andrew did correct me because I called him a long shot, but Andrew says it's a my racehorse, so who knows how long this long shot's actually going to be. The 6 T's the Gray. And, obviously he ran the Pat Day Mile, and, Pat Day Mile winners to Preakness winners. I'm guessing there are none. But he ran pretty damn well in that Pat Day Mile. Obviously got a bit of a pace setup in that spot, but he was pretty close up to the pace. And he kept on, and he won clear by a length in the quarter. And I really think that was a pretty good effort. And he beat a horse who we've talked about numerous times on this podcast or this live stream in Nash in that spot, and beat him pretty handily. And you're telling me he's potentially going to be a longer price this time. I know we're stretching out a bit, but I mean, the Arrogate on top. I mean, this horse shouldn't have a problem stretching out. Obviously, if you look at some of his previous efforts going a mile and an eighth, maybe you question that a little bit. But I'm willing to go back to the well at a pretty decent price. And I have him written as a B as well. I believe Fighting Irish is also on Seize the Gray, so much so he's got an exclamation point at the end. I mean, that's got to be good. And then Matthew Bickey, he's 6'9", 7'5" in here, so he loves Seize the Gray.
Are we
Imagination.
Sure that's Matthew Bickey and not Coots?
Just Steel and Mystic Dan. So Matthew and I see this pretty similarly as well.
I think I might have just
say,
broken Mark.
Of the two Lucas horses, I actually do like Seize the Gray more. I would like this horse so much more if it wasn't the fourth race in 7 weeks. And I just worry about that not worry, but that last furlong, that's going to be a lot.
Didn't Secret Oath do something similar and still win?
Or did Secret Oath just look tired by the time it got to the cotillion? I don't know. And so, this is a lot of racing in a short stretch. And I was so encouraged the horse won cutting back, and now we're going back to routing. And just, I don't know. I want to like that horse. Like I said, of the two Lucas horses, this is the one I would definitely prefer over Just Steel. So I can't fault you. And I think Seize the Gray, and I'd be interested, Andrew, Mark, if you guys have any opinion on this, and if not, that's fine. But I think this is the one that Lucas potentially sends after Imagination a little bit. That this horse is going to show speed and might not press, but is going to be pretty close to Imagination during the early goings of this race.
Now, Josh, I'm sorry I have to go back to this, but the only reason you like Seize the Gray is because the horse won the Pat Day Mile, and we all know who else won the Pat Day Mile.
Oh, my favorite horse of all time. The horse that got me absolutely hooked on horse racing. My goodness. Good call, Mark. I didn't even think about that.
That's that one time a year I get to make that reference.
The one time a year, and
the two others are really confused right now. They're like,
yeah,
I've heard this story. I just don't remember who the horse is.
Funny Duck up the rail in the mud.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Oh, I thought I was the smartest man alive. Right. I think I had five. This is literally the second day I had any money in an ADW, and I'm like, this horse is like 30-1 or something. Like, I'm betting this horse. This horse looks good. I don't even remember. The funny thing about it is, I had gone on Reddit, and I had found someone had posted on Reddit the DRF form. Which form, you might ask? Maybe the program. Maybe just the DRF past performances, or what's the other one? There's the other weird one, right? You know how they have all the different products. My friends, it was the DRF Easy form. Have you ever seen a DRF Easy form before?
Every race on one page.
I have no idea. Like, I don't even know what I was looking at. But for some reason, that horse popped out at me. $5 to win. I felt like a millionaire and the smartest man in the room. That was friggin' hilarious. And then now I'm doing a live streaming podcast about horse racing, lo and behold. But Matthew, I think you mentioned how this horse was prominent early in the Pat Day Mile and is obviously stretching out. And Jessica Tugwell, our friend, said, Imagination is going to look like he could win by 6 at the top of the stretch and lose by a neck. Well, you know who's going to be in second? It's going to be Seize the Gray. And, hey, maybe he's the one who catches them by a neck. That was interesting there. Andrew, I saw you laughing. I think it was right around when Matthew posted, "Here comes another oxbow."
Yes, it was. So that was my first instinct that, hey, maybe I could get to a reasonably high-profile position doing this. I was covering that year's Preakness Stakes for the Saratogian and the Troy Record, went down to Pimlico, Was a long drive that morning, I'll tell you that. Sat in that old rickety press box that they're winding up knocking down as part of the construction of the grandstand, and wound up giving out Oxbow that day at 13-1. I will forever be grateful to jockey Kevin Krieger for inexplicably, indefensibly rating Golden Sense that day. Golden Sense got rated going into the first turn. Oxbow got loose and forgot to stop. Paid $28 and change. That was a very good day for me, and on a number of different levels, because my column wound up getting published across a number of properties in the Northeast. So that worked out really good for me. So Matthew, thank you for the Oxbow reference there. I appreciate it.
I will also say that just as to put a bow or tie this Golden Sense angle back around, of course, Golden Sense, the sire of Mystic Dan, but more importantly, there has not been a horse that has finished 17th or worse in the Kentucky Derby to come back and run in the Preakness since Golden Sense. And I bring that up because Just Steel is, in fact, coming back to run 17th or worse in the Kentucky Derby to now run in the Preakness. So a lot of Golden Sense references in this particular race, which I find fantastic.
All right, Andrew.
Can you really quickly just highlight Fighting Irish's latest comment there, please? Thank you. I appreciate that. Commenters looking out for me. I absolutely love it. Appreciate that. So I'm going into this with the mindset that 3 horses, I think, can win this race. Mystic Dan makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to try to talk anybody off of that horse. He's logical. Tuscan Gold fits the profile of the Chad Brown horses that run really well in this particular race. We know he can get a mile and 3/16. He's been rested. He should be fine. The other horse, though, and the reason that I am on this stream, as Josh put it earlier today, because I will give out the horse that Caleb is apparently scared to give out, shout out to Caleb wherever he is horse number 2, Uncle Heavy. Uncle Heavy is 2 for 2 over a wet track, and his race in the Withers is worth several looks because, yeah, it didn't come back great on figures. Yeah, he didn't wind up beating the best field. That track was a conveyor belt that particular day. If you got to the lead, you were winning. El Grande O is in mid-stretch, clear by 4 lengths, looks home and cooled out. He still beats the 3rd place finisher by more than 2 lengths that day. Uncle Heavy comes and gets him. I thought that was notable. He then runs in the Wood Memorial, and as I've mentioned, I think that's a throwout for pretty much every horse in that race. He did not have a great trip. He broke from post 12 of 12. You're not going to win from post 12 of 12 going a mile and an eighth at Aqueduct with that short run into that first turn. It just was not happening for him. I had no problem drawing a line through that race. We know he likes the mud. He has been working well. The presence of a Rod Ortiz does not hurt. Uncle Heavy is going to be on all of my tickets. And if that one winds up coming home and paying a pretty decent chunk of change, regardless of anything else that happens throughout the course of Preakness weekend, I'm going to have a very, very good Preakness weekend. I am against catching Freedom. I keep watching the Kentucky Derby looking for an excuse. I couldn't find one. To me, it just seems like he may have already plateaued, and I liked him on Kentucky Derby Day 2. I picked him second that day. Imagination, don't like at all. I don't think he's been beating anything in California. If you rewatch the Santa Anita Derby, he is supposed to win that race by open lengths. He doesn't just not win. He winds up getting outfought by Stronghold, who ran okay in the Kentucky Derby, but it's not like he set the world on fire. To me, if Imagination was trained by anybody else, he'd be 3 or 4 times the price. He's going to be way too short for me. My bold prediction on this past episode of Drinking Champagne was that Imagination doesn't just not win, he finishes off the board. I'm not a fan of this horse. If this horse beats me, I'll tip my cap and I'll move on. But if one of horses 2, 5, or 8 winds up winning and brings home this pick 5, I'll be dancing.
All right, Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of coverage on this race for a number of reasons. But, I think everybody's kind of talked all the horses I want. I think Tuscan Gold and Imagination are the two that I'm most interested in for all the obvious reasons. I know we've mentioned Chase Sessoms, the one and only Wolf of Oaklawn, and he and I have talked this race into what feels like death at this point. And he's a huge Imagination fan, and I think we both see the pace complexion the same way. I know all the sort of asterisks on Imagination, but he's going to be controlling pace in here, and maybe he just does wait for other horses to run with. Maybe he's a head case or has whatever, he's immature or all those reasons, but he should be controlling pace. He should be able to handle an off track and the off going. I realize he's never done it before, and maybe he is distance limited. I tend to trust Caleb when he says those types of things, but he's a very, very, very logical winner in this race, just off the fact that he should have it all his own way on the front end. And, again, to Matt's point, maybe Caesar Gray does press him. I think of the two, of the other horses in the race, that one Lucas entry is the most likely to at least keep him honest on the front end. But, I've sort of seen this narrative before, and I think he's super alive in here. I think my top choice is Tuscan Gold, more for the fact that I just don't want to see Bob Baffert win this race one more time. Chad has done very well in the Preakness as well. But again, improving horse, needs to take another step forward. If he takes just even a tiny step forward, he's a major player in here. I liked him in the Louisiana Derby. He was a little bit flat in the lane, but I would imagine he's taken a couple of steps forward since that race and is, an interesting player in here. So I don't really have any sort of creative take. I do like Uncle Heavy quite a bit as well, but I think I'm okay being a little spread here because I have pricier opinions earlier on in the sequence, and I just want to be right and kind of cash my tickets at this point.
Anything else?
Really quick in the chat, shout out to Keith, who has a future at 99-1 on Uncle Heavy.
Ooh.
Like, I don't care if that's a $2 ticket or whatever. That's a good sweat, man. I'm pulling for you.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things to think about with Imagination in particular is, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, National Treasure got the equipment change leading into the Preakness of getting blinkers put on.
Sounds right.
Sounds right.
Yeah. I think so, because I agree with Josh, what you said, like very similar profiles. They're even connected on pedigree on the dam side, but they're it's one of those things where both horses, you could tell, like they didn't want to pass other horses. They just, like, if they started third, they were going to finish third. If they started second, they were going to finish second. If they started first, they were going to win the race. But the difference was they put Imagination, the blinkers on. And what's funny is the Scratch also had a pivotal role to play last year. His first mission scratched out of that Preakness, and I think would have absolutely pressured National Treasure in some way. And National Treasure got away with very slow fractions for the Preakness. I remember at one point Andy Sterling tweeted something along the lines of, if you had Red Route 1 being ahead of Mage at the half-mile mark, I didn't have that on my bingo card, basically. And, that was a very oddly run race last year. And so I guess, Imagination, they already have the blinkers on this horse. You have the far outside post. National Treasure had the inside post last year, which has historically been a really good place to be for the Preakness. And so I know Chase loves Imagination, and he's on my ticket. He's on my ticket for sure. I'm going to go 3 deep here with Mystic Dan, with the 3, in all likelihood, shortest price horses: Imagination, Mystic Dan, and Tuscan Gold. Like others, I went back and looked at Catching Freedom. He was my pick to win the Kentucky Derby. I obviously like the horse a lot, but I think that was a case of others moving back more than him moving forward. He went through the exact same hole Mystic Dan did and never made up any ground. And he really didn't have many excuses, I don't think, in that race, because he traveled the second least distance to only Mystic Dan, who traveled the shortest distance. And it's hard to make a case that he's going to now move forward in this next race. So I know, you never want to use the Kentucky Derby is notoriously a race you draw a line through. as we get further into 3 and 4 year old campaigns, and you go, well, they didn't run well in the Derby, but and you move on. But that was one where he had a pretty straightforward trip in that race, and he kind of settled where I thought he was going to settle, and he ran the race I was hoping he was going to run. And it just wasn't good enough, and so I just have a hard time thinking he's going to come back in the spot. I know I saw a post earlier today. The overseas markets basically have Mystic Dan at about 8-5, and basically a 3-way tie at about 4-1 for Catching Freedom, Tuscan Gold, and Imagination, all being roughly the same price. I think Imagination ends up taking more money at the end of the day, because never underestimate Bob Baffert supporters. And quite frankly, the Bob Baffert name in Baltimore, which he's won 8 times. So, I mean, there's good reason to support Bob Baffert in this spot. But I just think there's going to be a lot of public money going towards Imagination as we get closer to post.
One more thing before we move on, I do just want to mention the updated morning line odds that were apparently put out at some point today. This was according to FanDuel Racing. They've got Mystic Dan 8-5. They have Imagination 3-1, Catching Freedom 7-2, Tuscan Gold 9-2. Everyone else 12-1 or 20-1 in the case of the 2 inside horses.
That seems right.
How is Mugatu not 50-1? Come on now.
That's a very good question. I would have to imagine that there was a horse a couple of years ago in the Preakness that should have been 50-1 that wound up 13 or 14-1. Does anyone else remember this? It wasn't Happy Jack. It was some just bonkers odds board where a whole bunch of money went a whole bunch of different ways.
Well, that wasn't the one-eyed horse or something, was it?
There was some funky story.
Patch?
It wasn't Patch.
Was it Unoho? It wasn't Unoho, was it?
This is going to bother me for quite a while. And here, you guys talk about this. I'm going to try to look this up.
I will dress up. I will say I have a colleague at Naira Bets who has very, very curly hair, very similar to Mugatu in the movie Zoolander. And apparently I found out 2 years ago, actually dressed up as Mugatu for Halloween. So we may very well have a Mugatu sighting on Saturday up here at Aqueduct. But, it's funny, when he was in the Kentucky Derby, potentially as an also eligible, I had mentioned to somebody he gave off Rich Strike vibes in the Kentucky Derby, and that he was this AE who was going to draw the far outside post. He was a deep closer. He'd only ever won one race, which was his maiden, and he was coming out of the Turfway Park circuit. And I thought, he certainly, if you're looking for how do I replicate Rich Strike, Mugatu might have fit the bill. Ultimately, of course, he doesn't make the field for the Kentucky Derby, and I think he's really up against it. And I think Uncle Heavy, listen, I love Butch Reed. I love a good Pennsylvania bred, as I am myself. And he's a horse that I find myself rooting for, certainly. And he showed that he can close behind moderate fractions. He doesn't need a fast pace necessarily, that he's just going to get stronger as the races go longer. I agree with Andrew about crossing the wood out because that post position was just disqualifying from the get-go, and then the spill happening in the stretch just kind of, I think, skewed a lot of results. But if there's any horse that I feel confident at a big price that's going to run up into my vertical tickets, it's Uncle Heavy, who's absolutely in my trifecta for sure.
Guys, really quick, I found it. It was 2 years ago. It was Fenwick. Fenwick.
Oh, yeah.
It was something like 30 or 50-1 on the morning line, and someone somewhere hammered the horse.
So was that the Rich Strike effect, though, to some extent? Was that the Rich Strike year where everybody suddenly was like, oh, it's a long shot, I'm going to put money on this horse?
Yes, it was. That was the year early voting won the Preakness when Rich Strike skipped it. Epicenter blew the break and was second. There was no horse above 18-1 in that race. Happy Jack was 11-1. Fenwick was 13-1. Armagnac was the longest shot on the board at 18-1. But I knew there was a bonkers horse that took money for really strange reasons. I mean, even last year, the longest shot on the board was Coffee with Chris, and he was 10-1.
That's bonkers.
I know, right? I know that the Preakness is this big, huge party in the infield where everyone just gets smashed and listens to really bad EDM music all day. Yes, I'm old. I know. Get over it. But Some of the money that's been going into the Preakness the last couple of years has been sort of insane. I really hope we get that 20-1 price on Uncle Heavy. I know he's got to improve, but I think there are reasons to expect that he's going to improve. And if he does, and if there's some horse that tries to go with imagination, which I think one of the Lucases has to, I think there's a chance Uncle Heavy comes rolling late at a big number.
Anything else on this race?
Nothing on this race. I don't know if you're trying to end things up. I did have one other thing. I had a stupid price I like earlier in the card. If you're
oh yeah, who
don't
would race?
Don't like it? Go to Chick Lang, race 6, the outside horse, the 8 in here. Classic Joke, who's I think 30-1.
Oh yeah.
And
I like this horse in the Bayshore, and he sucked.
Yeah. So if we get a little weather and you get a little rain, the very, very short price on the morning line, Frost Free, is a horse that doesn't really like to win and doesn't have a pedigree. I mean, it has a win off, off and off track to break his maiden at Lone Star of all places in a different barn. I don't really know what the company he was keeping was that day, but Classic Joke is a horse that is 2 for 2 going the 6 furlong trip. They tried to stretch him out, and he just didn't handle the stretch out. I don't know if he's a desperate need the lead type, but he has Tomlinsons that say he should really handle the off going. I think there's a lot of speed drawn inside on him, but the speeds, I don't know if they're necessarily going to handle a wetter track. So I think at a really huge price, he's a really interesting player in this race. I had him marked down, and it was a horse that I just kind of wanted to toss out on stream because I don't know if you get that 30-1, but pedigree says he should love off going, and I think the cut back to 6 is really going to hit him be exactly what he needs.
1 point in his favor, the race that he won on March 8th at Tampa, that day's runner-up was Catalytic, who came back to run second in the Florida Derby. So that was a good race.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, I think that's going to do it for us here. Obviously, you can check our stuff out at ontherwronglead.com, at wrong_lead on Twitter. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead, hit like, hit subscribe, hit all the buttons down there. Matthew, where can people find you and what you got coming up?
People can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Obviously, I have a lot of content coming up on Naira Bets. You can find the Preakness and Black Eyed Susan analysis up there, as well as all of analysis of the graded stakes races for both of those days, in addition to my long shot of the day. And Mark and I will be celebrating Monday, May 20th as Assiniboia Downs opening day. Some of us here on the chat are not going to be celebrating, and that's, listen, it's their choice. It's their choice to be wrong, and it's okay. And so it's one of those things where we're going to be excited to start playing the late pick 5 Antonio Whitehall ticket, where we are just hammering home inside speed on the dirt sprints up there in Manitoba. So a lot of great stuff up on Naira Bet, so make sure to check it all out.
You should mention the extremely low takeout late pick 5.
Yes, lower takeout, and Craig Milkowski, very pleased. The timing, well, in a shocking development, we are going to start timing races when the gates open. I know that's a shocking development, but we're actually going to start timing races that way.
What? I thought the late pick 5 was a jackpot.
Or I'm sorry, late pick 4. Low takeout late pick 4.
Yeah, they didn't change everything, but they lowered takeout.
Sorry,
like 3 or 4 different wagers. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What was it? Win bets, I think they have a very low
win bets are lower too.
It's like a 12.5% win takeout.
You can just bet to win. That's legal. You don't have to bet multiple horses.
Shockingly,
go figure.
Wow. Pick 1. Yeah. Great track.
One.
Great track. Very fun to play. And to me, it just makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is, if you're somebody who's a new player and you're getting into kind of like ABC ticket construction, they have, I think, was it 20-cent pick 3s, which are just wonderful. You can play some fun little ABC combinations and kind of get the feel for approaching a new track or playing it in multi-ticket wagers. Great place to play.
Yeah, and it's also it's all dirt, and it's all, for the first month at least, it's all dirt sprints. Yeah. And so if you want to learn how to play, just don't try to start learning how to play at Keeneland. Jesus, you'll shoot yourself. Like, just
use better chalk at Keeneland.
Yeah, like that's true. Just focus on like one thing and getting good at one thing and like understanding one aspect of like, how do I handicap a dirt sprint race at this one track? And it's, and to your point, like super inexpensive wagers, base price is low, which I know for seasoned bettors, they like a higher minimum, but for beginners, you can learn how to build bad tickets and you learn from that. And that's a good thing rather than, having to sit there and put together a $72 ticket. You can put together a $15 ticket and go, oh, that should have been a $6 ticket, actually, and you learn.
And you can also play on with a pick 3, and you can play a $2 or $3 pick 3 that pays $20, and you're like, oh, geez, that was a great day, and I learned a lot, and I can approach that, that ticket construction. Great stuff. I know Matt, but the two of us are both going to be putting out a lot of content around this.
I got to tell
it's
you,
such a great track.
You might have convinced me to give Assiniboia another shot. I should go into full disclosure because we've talked to some of this. I had a couple of very bad experiences with Assiniboia back in 2020 when they were the only game in town, and they had a couple of post position drag nights that made Gulfstream Park look prompt. It was beyond aggravating and frustrating, and they also had different people managing the social media at that point in time, and there were several things that happened that were just should not occur on every level that ticked me off both as a handicapper and as a marketing type. But I got to tell you, what you had just mentioned, that's a lot of pluses that make it sound like a really horse player friendly track. You might have convinced me into giving Assiniboia Downs a mulligan of sorts. Granted, it's been 4 years and I feel like it might be time to just let the grudge go, but yeah. So I will
say they still do drag a little bit of
a little bit of time.
That is still not great, but they are. I will say, and Mark, I don't know how much you might have. The people that I've interacted with up there are lovely,
awesome.
And I have to say, I want to give them a shout out because my dad. Shout out to Blaine. My dad, who has blocked most of horse racing Twitter, but I don't believe has blocked the three of you, or
he had me blocked at one point.
Yeah, we got you unblocked. But my dad loves Assiniboia Downs, and irrationally just loves Assiniboia Downs. And they sent me a bunch of Assiniboia Downs swag for Father's Day 2 years ago, and it was very, very sweet of them to send. And my dad still has his Assiniboia Downs cap that he wears all the time, and his Assiniboia Downs coffee cup, and like everything like that. So, my dad's a huge fan. And he tweeted out the other day about like my great friends at Assiniboia. He has never been to Assiniboia and he has never talked to anyone at Assiniboia, but he believes he is friends with the people at Assiniboia. And maybe that's all that matters.
No,
Matthew, I'm going to propose something really quickly. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mark, but this is a really good brainstorm. At some point between now and the end of time, we need to have a stream on this platform of Matthew, Blaine, myself, and my father. Has to happen.
It would be chaos.
And you need Sarah too.
Horse racing Twitter.
Yeah, no, Sarah's my dad, just in a female version. But yeah, it's because they both go to bed by 9:00 and then they wake up at 3 a.m. and start like bothering me with things. So
wait,
this is
are you just living at home, Matthew? Is that what's happening? You're just
like
living at home.
Your life a sitcom?
Truly feels like it because Sarah at like 8:30 is like, well, time for bed, and I'm like, it's still light out. Like, what are we doing? And so, and then like I'll like wake up in the middle of the night and I'll like look and there's lights on in her bedroom, and I'm like, all right, I guess she's handicapping at 3 a.m. Like, okay, like just whatever. And then I look down at my phone at the same time, and my dad's texting me. By the way, my dad thinks he might be the backup singer for New York this year at the Belmont Stakes. That's a whole other discussion that we're having. But he sent me an audio recording of him singing a medley of That's Amore into New York, because he believes that he needs to bring some Dean Martin vibes to the overall singing of the song. So this is what I deal with when I wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m.
Aren't parents just the best?
They're the best. I love it. I love my father. I love him so much.
Love my dad very much as well. When he comes out here for 4th of July weekend, we make I'm at Pleasanton a lot. He comes up, we do a couple of handicapping seminars together. It's absolutely awesome. And by the way, seriously, if none of you have been out to Northern California, come to a Northern California racing fair. It's very good for the soul of a horse player. Field sizes aren't necessarily huge. You're going to get takeout rumblings, but I will tell you this. It is something when you have a $2,500 claimer on a nice day at Pleasanton and thousands of people are in a packed grandstand roaring. It's really cool. Much as we love Saratoga, and I love Saratoga just as much as anybody else, there are days where you can run a graded stakes race at Saratoga and not hear a pin drop on the apron on a weekday. You hear a $25,000 claiming crowd go nuts, absolutely bonkers from the other side of the grandstand. It's really, really cool. If any of you ever wind up coming out here, know that I am coming to you live from an office/guest room if anybody ever needs to crash.
Awesome. Well, and then Andrew, you got some stuff coming up on your side as well, right?
Yes, I do. You can look at winnersandwhiners.com for a whole bunch of really cool things, not necessarily just horse racing related. We are, in fact, the Caitlin Clark Network with as much buzz as she has been getting.
Wonderful,
minus
24 tonight. Minus 24 on the plus
minus 24. Ouch. But yeah, people are searching for Caitlin Clark prop bets. So we are going to give people Caitlin Clark prop bet information for every game this season. Isn't that wonderful? But
wow,
yeah,
you really want people to lose a lot of money, don't you?
We want people to sign up for sports betting accounts. That's what we do. That's the point of affiliate marketing. But yes, other than that, you can follow me on Twitter at Andrew Champagne. You can look at the On the Wrong Lead channels, wherever you get your podcasts for Drankin' Champagne, which we do every week. We had a really good conversation about the rest of the Preakness card as well. Yes, Fighting Irish, it is a tremendous market. And I got to tell you, kidding aside with all this stuff, it makes a lot of sense when you consider that the WNBA players that are entering the league right now, their parents came of age when Bird and Magic and Jordan were breaking into the NBA and saving the NBA from the doldrums that they were in at that time. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and it'll liven up the traditional slow season of sports betting between now and the start of football betting in August.
Wow, just throwing baseball under the bus like that, huh?
Nobody bets baseball. That's what we found.
Is Stephen Fox still in chat?
Look, here's the thing that makes me absolutely die laughing. So in Colorado, in the month of March, Coloradans bet more on table tennis than they did on baseball. They bet $14 million on table tennis. They bet $13 million on baseball.
What a bunch of degenerates.
I know, right? Table tennis.
Oh, man.
Josh, have you ever bet on teams in video games winning things in foreign countries, like third-tier video game leagues?
Not third tier. Caleb has, I know for sure. He was betting Counter-Strike.
Classmates or like part of that, right?
He was betting
not sports.
Yeah, no, that was during COVID. He was betting like second and third tier pro Counter-Strike. Like it's just wild. I've done some DraftKings stuff with League of Legends when that first started, but other than that, I haven't really delved into esports. But yeah, we've definitely gone off the rails. We're talking about esports betting now, so that's gonna do it for us. Obviously, at wrong_lead, on wronglead.com. Like and subscribe, and we will catch you guys later. Thank you.